Hey everyone, Urban Fish Keeper here. I hope you're all keeping well. It's late Sunday evening and I've been having some challenges with putting together a video today. So what I wanted to do, and that's why I'm doing it quite late. So firstly, I've just finished feeding everything in the fish room, and that's why the discus tank behind me is looking a bit cloudy, and that's the price that you pay when you're feeding an oxide mix. That you'll have a bit of a cloudy water after feeding. In today's video, I want to talk to you about one of the dwarf cichlids that I've bred, and in line with what we're trying to do in this channel is to try something different, try something new, breed something, and then move them on and try something else. So the dwarf that I'm going to talk about today, how I keep them and how I've bred them, is the Apistogramma hongsloi. Now, let me just show you quickly the male and the female. They're separated at the moment. The female is with the fry, and I'll talk about why I do that, and the male's in a separate tank. So this is the male, and here's the female with the fry. All right, so before we get started, firstly, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody that subscribed. I really do appreciate it. For those of you that post comments and ask questions, I appreciate that as well. I make every effort to answer those as best I can to the best of my knowledge. So thanks a lot for subscribing, and thanks a lot for the comments and the questions that people ask. It is really appreciated. And the other thing is, it's good to see that internationally, the US at the moment is probably the biggest audience that watches this channel. So thanks a lot to the guys in the States that watch this, the guys and the girls. Then to the Australian subscribers, thank you very much as well. And there's there's subscribers and people watching in Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, Netherlands, Germany, Sweden, even in my hometown of South Africa, or my ex-hometown of South Africa. So thank you to everybody that watches these videos. It helps motivate for me to make some more of these. All right, so let's get started. Apistogramma hongsloi and how I've bred it. So firstly, let's start off with the tank. Again, in keeping with the theme of what we're trying to use, maximize space. Can we breed stuff in smaller aquariums? I breed my hongsloi in a 20 litre. That's about about 5 gallon aquarium. So not a lot of water. And these are the Kmart 20 litres that I've got here, so just bought from my local Kmart. Once it's got water in it and everything else, you're probably only looking at about, maybe 16, 17 litres of water that you've got to work with. So, getting it set up right and getting that water stability right is really critical when you want to try and breed. Some of the, the dwarfs are probably, especially the Apistogramma, some of them can be a little bit tricky. Others are easier, but some of them can be a bit tricky to get them to, not beat each other up and get them to spawn and successfully raise the fry. As you've heard me say before, wherever possible, I leave the eggs and the fry with the parents, or in this case with the mother, and I then only remove those when they're much older. All right, so let's get started. That's the tank size, that's the capacity. From a filtration point of view, I use all the 20 litre breeders are all on this shelf here, and they've got blue black rams. I've got the hongsloi, I've got the Via, and I've also got the Via Gold in this aquarium here, but we're talking about a hongsloi today. So from a filtration, all these tanks have the same orientation of those aquariums is this way. And at the back, I run a Madden filter. Now, I have posted up a video going through and explaining how the Madden filter works and how to build one. It's quite straightforward. All it is a piece of sponge that goes across the aquarium. It has an uplift behind the sponge. You attach air to that. It forces the water through the uplift back into the main aquarium. That water then moves back through the sponge, and that then becomes your filtration. So, for me, that's the method I use, but you can, if you want to, just use a normal sponge filter. And I do use this in some of my top aquariums on the top shelf. And the sponge filter that I use is this one. Let me just move this out of the way. Looks like that, right? And the model that I recommend for the 20 litre is the SMXY 280, and it's suitable for a 150 litre aquarium, so more than adequate. And the reason I go with this one and not a bigger one is because of the profile of the sponge. It's quite a low profile sponge, so when it sits in the aquarium, it's not too high. All right, so from a filtration, those are the two options. This is the one I use. Excuse me. When it comes to substrate, I use gravel in the bottom of mine, a fine gravel. And that's what I use in my hongsloi aquarium for breeding. The other thing I do, and again the orientation is this way, is I use black vinyl on both sides to blacken out so they can't see either side. And if I was to use a bare bottom, which I have in some of them, I use black vinyl at the bottom as well. Now when it comes to water preparation, what I will say is for the dwarf cichlids, the Apistogrammas in particular, my view is that this should not be rushed. And once you've set up the tank, I would say leave the tank for a good few weeks. Let it mature, let it settle. Make sure that the tank is right before you put your pair in there to attempt to breed. I wouldn't go with add liquid bacteria and a week later add the fish. I think you're running too much of a risk if you use that system. While it's maturing, there's nothing wrong with you putting in something that's a little bit more tolerant in that aquarium to help with the full, help getting the bacteria levels up and all the rest of it. But I would make sure that I leave the aquarium to mature really well. The other reason I would leave it for a while is that when you set up an aquarium for the dwarfs or the apistos, my opinion is that it should have a lot of hiding space and as much plants as possible. So if you're leaving it for a while, the good thing about having a lot of plants in there is that you could probably expect that you will have infusoria and a couple of other little bugs in there crawling around in that aquarium by the time you add the parents. And if you then have a spawning, there's some food initially for the fry. The other thing is that I use things like, you can use, first of all, for me, for hongsloi, I make sure I put in pieces of wood, put in lots of plants, put in flower pots, those like clay type pots that you can buy at your local nursery, broken pieces of that, and as I said, plenty of plants. The only time I cull the plants back is when the mother is with the fry. And then I don't mind pulling some of the plants out because nobody needs to really hide. The other thing is when I set up this aquarium for hongsloi, I make sure that I use matured water to set up the aquarium. So again, matured water is water that's stood in a bucket for 24 or 48 hours before adding it in. And that's the same water that I use for water changes. Now on the subject of water changes, what is very interesting is trying to find the trigger for getting your apistos to spawn. Now, sometimes spawning is created by many different things. My stir-by cats, if I want them to spawn, I increase the water flow in the aquarium, with an air stone as well as with the uplift, and the more turbulence, the happier they seem, and that triggers the spawning. My discus seem to, a water change kicks their spawning. For the hongsloi, what I found is, and I did the water changes and I didn't get any positive results, is that I stopped doing the water changes on the aquarium, and after about 4 or 5 weeks maybe, they spawned. Now whether that was because the water was just exactly where they wanted it or what the factors were, I'm not too sure, but a lack of water change with my hongsloi seemed to have triggered the spawning. Now, the other thing I do add to these aquariums when I'm setting it up for hongsloi is I make sure that I have some botanicals in there. And in my case, I use Indian almond leaves. And I'm using those Indian almond leaves for two things. One is to help a little bit with the pH. And the other one is that I want the tannins in the water. So that's what I use. And it could be anything from 1 leaf, depending on the size of the leaf, to 3 leaves. pH of my breeding 20 litre tanks are all around about 6.4. And the temperature that I run on these tanks is, I don't have an individual heater per tank. I'm running a product underneath here, which the guys in the US will know very well, called FlexWatt, which is used for reptiles, and we use them for reptiles, for heating reptile tubs. I've got FlexWatt running underneath here, connected up to a thermostat. It's sitting at 27.8 at the moment, and that's what I run these on, around between 27 and 28 degrees, with a heating strip underneath, all of them running the FlexWatt heating. Now in Australia, FlexWatt, we used to be able to get it. I've had a look recently because I've wanted more for another project, and it seems like we can't get it locally anymore, so we'd have to get it from internationally if we wanted to get it. But that's what I use. But if you didn't have that option, you could use a heater in here, run it between 27 and 28. The other option is that you could do, as per one of my videos, where you use one aquarium with a heater and you use an overflow system if you're basically breeding the same stuff, and that can heat multiple aquariums. Right, so pH of around about 6.4 and temperature between 27 and 28 degrees. Now the next challenge you'll have in a small aquarium like this is, great, you've set up the aquarium, it's all matured, it's ready to go. You introduce the pair, you've got lots of plants, lots of hiding space so that they don't get hammered too badly. But still, even with all the hiding space, one of them are still taking a beating from the other one. So what I do is I have another aquarium like this running that I'm able to move the bully into. So same water parameters, same everything else. So if the male is bullying the female, and she's not coming out to feed because every time she comes out, he hammers her. Or she's sitting right up at the top on the plants and hiding away. What I do is I move the male out and I allow the female in the tank that I want to breed, I allow that female then to become more dominant in that aquarium. And then after a few days, once she's settled and is eating well, I move the male back. Now I found that when moving the male back, she hammers the male and I have to then move her and so forth. And I've had to do that with quite a few, going backwards and forwards, until you get to a point where they settle down and they're compatible with each other. They might do a little bit of chasing, but it's nothing, none of the fish are harmed in any way, or there's no nipped fins or anything like that. So the other thing I would say for the hongsloi, and I found they like this, is please, try and have some caves in there. So you've got everything else, you've got the flower pots and everything else. If you can put it in a cave or two, they seem to enjoy spawning in the cave. Excuse me. Once you introduce the pair, they may start showing some spawning behavior. Once they do, they'll select a site. The female will lay, the male will fertilize, and it will then be guarded and looked after. Once the fry become free swimming, it's at that stage that I then remove the male out of these small aquariums. And the reason I do that is the female spends a lot of time chasing the male away. So she doesn't necessarily hurt the male or bully him, but she spends a lot of time. And to me, I think that creates a little bit of stress in her. And she seems a lot more relaxed when the male's not there and she's swimming around with the fry. So that's what I do. I move the male out. And I don't do multiple females to one male in the size aquarium. I go with a single pair. Now, it may help to have more than one female, and it may distract the male from bullying if he's the one doing the bullying. But for me, the method I use with hongsloi is one pair for a 20-litre aquarium. Once you've got the fry free swimming, the question is always, well, what do I feed them? What I do is the fry are reasonable sized compared to some other fry, like better fry or something. There's normally enough, if the tank is well matured and has been there for a while, there's normally enough for them to feed on for the first few days. But what I do is I substitute that with, if I've got infusoria cultures going, I substitute with use a pipette and I put a couple of squirts of infusoria culture in where they're swimming. I also add in a little bit of vinegar eel. And then once we start getting to about day 5, day 7, I introduce microworm and then newly hatched brine shrimp. And once the bellies are showing nice and pink from the brine shrimp, it's just brine shrimp from that point forward. I leave the fry with the mother till they get to a size that I feel comfortable to move them. So there's no set time that I leave them with the mother. Now, when it comes to feeding the parents in preparation for getting them ready to spawn, or once you've got them in the tank and you want to use it as maybe some sort of trigger, I use predominantly frozen brine shrimp, gets fed to my hongsloi. I will occasionally give a bit of frozen bloodworm, and that's occasionally, and I will occasionally give some freeze-dry blackworm, again, occasionally. What I also do, because I have brine shrimp running in this room all the time, I do put a squirt of newly hatched brine shrimp in the hongsloi's aquarium when I'm waiting for them to get ready to spawn. I just put, every time I feed all the fry, they get a squirt of newly hatched brine shrimp as well. Now, whether that's a factor, whether that helps to kick off the spawning because they see there's tiny food in the water and therefore it's good for them to do that, I'm not too sure, but I use that method as well. And that's around the fry. Again, just the challenges: make sure that you've got a well-matured aquarium for your hongsloi. Make sure that, even if the pair is not compatible, that you keep an eye on them and move them, move the bully out as you have to. In this size aquarium, even with a lot of good hiding spaces, which you must have, lots of spaces and things for them to go under and plants, even with that, you still run the risk that one of them could be bullied by the other, or at least kept up at the top somewhere where they're not getting as much food or not feeding as well. So yeah, make sure you've got good plants, good hiding spots, filtration, choose whatever you want. Madden filter or just a standard sponge filter. And other than that, it's quite straightforward. The challenge is really just getting them to initially spawn and trying to figure out what that trigger is. Sometimes it's temperature, sometimes it's pH. In my case, it wasn't pH, it wasn't temperature. It seemed to be the lack of water change that triggered that. And again, botanicals, I use Indian almond leaves. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention around food is I've just recently bought this product, as in a week ago, and this is called DRP Aquatic Growth Formula. Now, I'm not too sure if you can get this anywhere outside of Australia, but there's been a fair amount of talk on some of the forums about this product, and this is what it looks like. Yeah, there's been a fair amount of talk on the forums about this, about how good this food is. I don't have an opinion on it yet. Like I said, I bought it about a week ago. I'm going to try this on my dwarfs, so the hongsloi, the Via, the blue-black rams. I'm going to try it on the discus, and I'm even going to try it on the bedders, but I think they would probably eat it because they'll eat just about anything. So once I've given this a try and I've tried it on various fish, I'll do another video and let you know what my view is on this particular product. So it comes in different sizes, DRP 1, 2, etc, etc. All right, guys, well, that's probably it from me. That's around the breeding of hongsloi. If you have any questions, just pop them in the comments and I'll try and answer them as best I can. Other than that, give it a go. The method I've described is basically the same method that I use for Via. It's the same method that when I previously bred cacatoides, except those were in bigger aquariums, and I'm trying now to focus on the smaller aquariums. But it's the same method that I use for the blue-black rams in a 20-litre aquarium. And that's worked for Via, hongsloi, and the blue-black rams as well. All right, so good luck. Give it a go. Post in the comments any questions. If you've not subscribed, appreciate you subscribing. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, like. Other than that, have a really good week. Stay safe, look after yourselves. Urban Fish Keeper out.